So today we're going to learn about SQL injection. We're going to learn about how we can exploit SQL injection vulnerabilities and gain access to a system, a web application without ever knowing the username or even the password. Yes, that's what we're going to learn today. We're going to exploit a vulnerable application and bypass login without knowing what the password is or even the username, and gain full access to a system without ever knowing even anything. So remember, this is strictly for educational purposes. I do not intend to promote any kind of malicious behavior on the internet. Remember to use this knowledge, responsibly. I'll never be responsible for any misuse of this content. So remember one more thing: if you need to get hands-on practice, you want to practice cybersecurity. You want to practice ethical hacking. You want to learn things in a practical environment. This is where you're gonna go. This is the website I recommend. You need to sign up for AstralGuard Cyber Academy and get what we call a lab access code. When you get a lab access code, you're gonna have time to practice in a safe environment. Practice with real world systems without any kind of simulations. So, and how do you get a lab access code? It's very easy. Before I show you that, I want to show you that there is a lot of labs you can really sign up for and practice. For example, if you want to learn about cross-site request forgery, this is the lab. You can see this is right over here. You want to learn about open redirects. You want to learn about prototype pollution. You want to learn about remote code execution via template injection. It's all here, guys. You need to get a lab access code and start practicing. Cybersecurity or even ethical hacking is just like math. It's all about practice, hands-on practice. If you keep on watching videos, you're gonna end up like that. You're not gonna learn stuff. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to sign up for courses and even lab access code so you can start the practice. So how do you get a lab access code? This is very easy. You just have to go to our website. So this is AstralGuard Cyber Academy website, and you're gonna go over to enroll. So when you go over to enroll, you're gonna find a form right over here, and you're gonna fill the form with whatever stuff you need. Then when you need to select the course, for example, if you need a lab access only, like lab access, you don't need to enroll in any of the courses. You're gonna go right over here and select what we call so I don't think that option is right there. Lab access code is not there. It's okay. So you just have to select any course, or maybe you can contact them directly. You can contact them over here and they're gonna help you get lab access code. Or maybe if you want to enroll in the courses, there are so many of them right over here, about 6 courses, and they're not really so expensive, and they're really good from beginners, intermediate, and advanced courses. They are right there. Okay, so let's proceed with today's program, and that is learning about exploitation of SQL injection vulnerabilities. So we need to learn what SQL injection is and why do we have to learn about it. So SQL alone is a short for structured query language, which is a language that is used to query databases. So if you want to communicate to databases, that's the language you're going to have to learn. That's the language you're going to have to use. So that is SQL, structured query language. Then what does it mean when we say SQL injection? So this means inserting or using SQL queries that maybe were never intended for that web application. So that is more like that, using of malicious SQL commands or payloads that maybe were never intended for that particular purpose or for that particular web application or for malicious intentions. Then what is the importance of learning about it? Why do we have to learn about it? There's just a lot of vulnerabilities that we can really learn about. Then why SQL injection? So when we come right over here on OWASP Top 10 2025, we see SQL injection was one of the top 10 severe web application vulnerabilities in 2025. And you can see the ranking is here. This is the ranking, 3rd and 5th. So that is the reason why we need to learn about it. What is the importance of learning about it? exploitation of SQL injection, we learn how it comes about, then we can learn how to prevent it. So by knowing what brings SQL injections, we can learn how to avoid it, how to protect against it. So that's what we're going to learn about it today. Then how does it really come about? How does SQL injection really come about? So let me explain something. So first, what causes it is lack of input validation or sanitization. So failure to validate or sanitize data, input that is being submitted into a web application is very dangerous, because you are putting a lot of trust into the users. You believe they will not submit any kind of malicious data, but that's not right. We do not have to trust user input. We always have to sanitize and validate. You need to define rules. Is this data supposed to be submitted over here or not? If it's not, then you have to reject that. And then another problem that brings about that is what we call a direct string interpolation or concatenation. Getting the user input and using it directly in an SQL query brings problems, because there is a lot of trust. You do not validate data, then an attacker is going to submit maybe a payload, an SQL injection command. Then remember, you are interpolating it into the SQL command. So that's going to cause a lot of problems, because the application is going to try to execute that because it understands the syntax. So it will be familiar with the syntax, and it will try to follow the instructions and execute it. And remember, it's not aware. It doesn't know if this is really malicious or not. So I hope we understand how it really comes about. For example, I'm going to give you an example. This is an example. For example, this would work in authentication, where you submit a username and a password. So you can see we are trying to validate or to compare data in a table called users. That's why you see select from users. That means there is a table called users, and probably this is where all the user data is being kept. And in those users, I need you to select a record where the username is username and the password is password. So this is where the vulnerability really comes about. For example, if at the very first time you submit correct data, for example, the username is admin, like this over here, and the password, you can say for example, like password, we can use that, password 123. That is very okay, that is gonna work out. But what if an attacker injects what we call an SQL command? For example, in this case, select from users, where the username is admin and the password is this right over here. So because the system is familiar with this kind of syntax, it will try to execute this. So that's where the vulnerability comes about. So let's make a quick recap. What brings about SQL injections? First is lack of user, we are unable, web applications do not, sanitize user input. That's one. Then secondly, there is no sanitization to sanitize the data if it has any kind of malicious tags, to remove them. Then a lot of trust. So you do not trust, you do not sanitize, you do not do what we call input validation. You accept whatever comes in. Then another thing is direct string interpolation. Like you get the data, for example here, it means if somebody sends in anything, it's going to go right over here. So that is direct string interpolation or concatenation, which is very dangerous. So at least right now we understand what SQL injection is and how it comes about, and why do we really have to learn about it, why it really matters. We at least have a picture, right? So we're gonna go and exploit it today and see how it really works. So remember, I told you, if you wanna learn how to exploit this in a safe environment, you're gonna have to sign up for either our courses or for a lab access code, and you're gonna be given a lab access code for any time you want, and you're gonna have to practice this safely. So that's how we learn in cybersecurity. That's how we learn the hacking. We do not learn by watching the videos. So for today, we're going to learn about using this uh, lab over here. I'm going to open it so we can see what it looks like. So this is the lab, and we do not need to create an account. We're going to bypass all that and access somebody's account. So we're going to go to access the terminal, which is going to task us to log in, and we do not know what the credentials are. So this is the lab we are going to use. I'm going to copy the URL, and I can close this because we do not need it anymore. I don't think we need it. So this is what we are going to do. So we're going to use burp in today's video, and if you don't know how, if you don't know how to use burp, you have to follow along because it's pretty easy to learn. So I'm gonna turn on burp, like burp suite. So I'm using burp, the community version, the free version. It's really great. Okay, so because we are using Burp Suite, the community version, that means some of the features are striped off, like we're using just a few features that are available for us. That's very okay. Okay, I'm gonna delete this and this. Let's close one. We only need one. We don't need a lot of it. Okay, I think we only have one instance. That's very great. So I'm gonna turn this on, and whenever I'm working with burp, I use this Firefox because it's already configured to use burp. It's always set up, so I do not need to configure it again by installing the burp certificate or stuff. So it's already set at this time. Okay, so burp at this point is about to be ready for use, and I'm gonna just click start burp. Alright, so as it is starting, we can try to access our lab. It's here. So you can see the proxy is refusing connections because it's already using the burp proxy. We have to wait for the burp to start properly, then the page can load up properly. It can be able to accept the connection. Okay, that is okay. Then we're gonna have to try to refresh. So you can see right now it's working. So I want you guys to pay attention and understand something today. So first, if we need to exploit what we call SQL injection vulnerabilities in a web application, this is what we're gonna do. Remember, this is strictly for education purposes. For example, you are facing a login page, for example, this one, and you don't know the username or even the password. So in this particular web application, the username is known as the operator ID, and the password is the access key. So that should never confuse you. So it's just the wording, but the functionality is probably the same. So what is the very first thing you're gonna have to do? First, we're gonna have to send a very innocent request to see how this application behaves. So how do we do that? I'm going to say that like the operator ID, like the username, is going to be admin. And for the access key, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't know if it's really correct, but what is the main intention of this? We need to see how this web application really, really works and how does it communicate. So we could get a lot of clues right over here. And remember, in real world scenarios, you're not gonna have this kind of console where you can be able to see what is coming back from the back end, what is going on exactly. So because this is a lab environment for practice, so you can really understand what is going on. That's why we have this kind of network analyzer or the console that helps you to see what is exactly is going on. But in real world web applications, in real world systems, you can have only this part right over here. So still it's going to be the very same approach. So first we're going to send without even intercepting this with burp. Okay, we're going to give it time to authenticate to try to compare the input if it's really available, if we have anybody using. Okay, so I hope you can see. Let's try to take a look in the network analyzer or in the console. So these are timestamps and authentication failed, and why? It's because of invalid username and password. That's why in the response we get a 401. So the status code 401 means unauthorized. So that's the expected behavior. There is nothing suspicious for now. This is the very, expected behavior. And the response body is successful, which means it's not successful. Why? The error is because of invalid either username or the password. So that is some kind of security. They do not tell us what exactly is correct or wrong. They say either the username or the password is wrong. So that is security. That's okay. That is the very expected behavior of secure systems. So still this is the very same thing. And one more important thing, we can see this is showing us this is the endpoint right over here. So this is the endpoint that is taking the username that we submit right here and the password to the backend for comparison, to compare with what is in the backend. So let's just confirm if this endpoint is really up or functional. And how do we test that? It's very easy. You're gonna have to try to fetch from it. You're gonna have to try to fetch to run a fetch request. So this gives us this tells us that this is up and running. So this endpoint is live because it is rejecting what we call the fetch requests. What does it mean? It accepts post. How did I get to know that? Because I need to make sure you understand every single thing, because you can see here it is telling us post, and that is the normal behavior in authentication systems, especially in login pages. Post is being used because it is used to send data to the backend for comparison, for testing. But we were doing what we call a fetch because browsers do use fetch to gate or request resources. I hope that's clear. And then when we need to look at the headers, so what are the headers? So these are the headers supported by the application, by the server. And these are the headers, application JSON, and the payload is right over here. This is what we sent in. We sent to the backend for validation. That is the username, admin, and the password, 12345. And they failed because they are wrong. One of them could be wrong, or maybe both of them. Okay, so we already know how the system really behaves. Actually, there is nothing suspicious for now. Okay, what is the next thing we need to do? We need to send another request, but this request, we shall not allow it to reach the server. We shall capture it. We shall intercept it using the burp suite, and then try to analyze more, and then try to send maybe some payloads and see if we can really exploit it. This is what we're going to do then. We're going to come back to burp right over here, and we're going to go to proxy and turn on the proxy. So the proxy is on right now. What does it mean? Any request we send, it will be intercepted. It will be captured before it gets to the server. Let's do that. So we don't need to change. You can change. You can maintain this, whatever you want to do. So I'm going to send this. So you can see at this point, it has not yet been intercepted. What we have intercepted is the options like the prevalence, which is the first kind of check, security check, before the real post is being sent, before the real post request is being sent. So you always need to learn that. you can see here, it's actually empty. It's only the headers that are being sent. So this is more like a knock. It's more like security. Is this like the front end supposed to communicate to me? Or if it's the one, yeah, so it's gonna tell it that, yeah, this is right, then you can continue. If it's wrong, it's gonna refuse all that. So we're gonna have to forward this or release this to go and then come back, so our request or the post we need, our main request can go as well. Okay, this is exactly what I was talking about. So the pre-flight or the options request is done, and you can see this is the real request we are interested in, because first it's post and the previous one was just options, and the previous one was empty, just headers. But right now this contains the payload, what we are sending, and that is the username and the password. That's very interesting. So what do we need to do? Okay, I'm going to send this to what we call the repeater. I'm going to send it to the repeater right over here, and then I'm going to go to the repeater. So the repeater is a very important feature in the Burp Suite, because it helps us to send data without going back to the browser, like to communicate to the system without going back to the browser. We can replay the data a couple of times, so many times as we want, before going back to the browser. Okay, so first I am going to send this. I'm going to release this because at this time it's being captured, it's intercepted, it has not yet reached the server. How do we prove that? We can check right over here. You can see it's still struggling with authentication. You can see it's still authenticating because we have captured this. So we're going to try to send it. We're going to release it to reach the server for validation. Okay, so this is what we wanted. We have released it. We can check. So we're gonna check right over here. You can see this is the response from the server, and success is false. What is the error? Where is the problem? Why is the success false? Because invalid username or password. So I need to explain some information here that most of the people tend to skip, to leave out, and it's very important for us to learn in cybersecurity, in penetration testing, in bug hunting, and all that. It's very important. Okay, so we need to interpret all this information. First, we can see HTTP 2.0 unauthorized. So this means this is a HTTP request version 2 that brought back 401 unauthorized. So the 401 error code means this is not accepted. The server understands your request, but it is not going to, process it because it's not allowed. So this is very normal because the data we sent in is not valid. There is no user code admin who has this particular password. Okay, then access control allow credential true. So this tells the browser you are allowed to send the credentials like the cookies for validation, and access control allow headers content type. So this is for the headers and the allowed methods. So this number for access control allow methods is post and options. That is exactly what we showed you. This is exactly what we showed. Yeah, this is what we showed you. When we send the very first request, we got an options, which I told you is more like a test or a security request to first go to the server and then bring back, some information before the main post goes back. And those are the only allowed methods, post and options. That's exactly what we saw back then. Then the access control allow origin. This tells that what is the origin supposed to send us request or to communicate with us. This is the only origin. And this is the reason, I mean, this is one of the jobs, I mean, the importance of these options. It has to validate, is the origin valid? Is it allowed to communicate to the server? Yes, so if everything is fine, then the post is gonna proceed. If something is wrong, you're gonna have problems like cause problems. Then the catch control public message 0 must revalidate. So this means this request gets expired immediately because the message is 0 and the browser has to send it for revalidation. That's why you can see revalidate. And the content type is an application JSON and the encoding is UTF-8. So we can see the content type right here is application JSON, and we can confirm one more time, it's right here. So that's very right. Then for the date and time, that's very obvious. Everybody understands that servers do log the time stamps of every request. Then the E tag, or what we call the entity tag, is what the browser uses to know if this request has been tampered with or not. So it uses what we call the entity tag. So the W means weak entity tag. So it means, literally this means like, yeah, the request is the same, but it's not very identical, like byte by byte. It looks very same, but not very identical. So that's why we have the weak E tag. So this is an entity tag used by the browsers to verify if the request has been modified or been changed. And the W here, it means weak entity tag. That means this is it's the same but not very identical. Byte by byte, like every single thing is the same. And the server, that is very clear. That means the server that is doing all this is Verso, and it's the strict transport security max. This means this is like a security enforcement that communicate to me via secure transport security for these years. So this has to be converted in years. I don't know how many years these are, but if you know some good math, you can calculate that, because I'm gonna need to calculate this in 2 years. I don't know if they're about 2 or 3. I don't know. I'm not pretty sure about that. You can calculate and understand that. But this is what it means. It means for the next this amount of years after calculation, you need to communicate to me via STS, strict transport. So that means you need to use this HTTP. And then the X versus catch means, it means this is a very fresh request. It's not a catch, or maybe it was cached. It's very fresh. Okay, so this is what this means. And this X version, it's called Verso ID. So this is an internal tracking ID used by Verso to track this request. So if internally Verso needs to track this request, it's going to use this particular ID, and the content length is 56. Then this is the payload, or this is the response from the backend. So I hope that is very clear for everyone, because most of the people skip this part, and it's very important. And one more thing you need to understand, it doesn't mean every single time they are going to be the same. Some stuff's going to be the same, but others won't be the same. They will vary depending on the setup, on the configuration, and a lot more things. In the row, this you can change how you need to view this. Maybe you want to look at it as pretty text, like pretty. You want to see the raw data, you want to see in hex render. This is not going to work unless this is some kind of a page that can really render. That's when this is going to work. There is no way this can really render. So this is the hex version of this data. I hope that's clear, guys. Then it's time for the mission to exploit this. So this is one of the greatest importances of burp, and especially the repeater, because we are going to replay this without going back to the browser. So we're gonna head over to this website. It's called Invicti, it has some payloads used for bypassing login screens that we are going to use for today's sessions. So we're going to have to copy this payload like this and come back right over here and go to the username part and delete this and replace with the payload, okay, like that. And then we're going to try to log in. So we have started injecting SQL commands. If actually it's vulnerable, we're going to get to know. Let's try this. So I'm going to send this. So validation is going on the back end. Do we have a user code this with this password? So we have already gotten the response that is a 40 and authorized. Why? Because invalid either username or the password. At the moment, we do not know if maybe it's the username or password is wrong, because the system is using what we call generic error messages. Okay, that didn't work. So we are not going to say this is not vulnerable. We shall try something else. We're going to delete this and replace with that, and then run this. Okay, so this time around, the error message, the response is very different from the previous one. Actually, this is very interesting for the attackers. I'm not going to explain all this because I have already explained all this. I'm going to focus more on this. So the success is false. And why? Because we go to database error this time around. So if you're a pen tester, this gives a lot of clues. Pen testers and ethical hackers pay attention to detail. This gives a lot of information. Previously, the error message was pretty clear, 40 and unauthorized because of invalid credentials. This time around, when we check right here, it's a 500 internet server error. It means something broke on the server, and this is very interesting for us. That means this particular payload has crashed something on the server. In the database, something went wrong. And you can see the message the details, the error messages tell us everything. Success is false. And why? Because database errors occurred. Why? Give us details. Syntax errors. So this is showing that something on the database broke. The database struggled to interpret this. So it broke. And why? Because of a syntax error. So this isn't somehow, for the attackers, it's very great. Actually, for the attackers, this is very good to them because it reveals a lot of information, and this is very critical. But for cybersecurity professionals, like for the defenders, for white hat hackers, this is very dangerous because this is very vulnerable because it's leaking, it's leaking what we call it has verbose error messages which tell it what exactly is going on, what is broken. And this is helpful to attackers to customize their attacks and exploits. So the attacker already knows what is the problem and what I need to focus on. So we are learning both the bad side and the good side. We are learning both the white hat hacker side and the black hat hacker side. I hope you can see this, guys. For the white hat hacker, this is very dangerous. Even for the organization, this is very dangerous to them. For the developer, this is very dangerous because the system actually reveals a lot of information in an error message, and that is not good. It's not a secure practice. You need to suppress, sensitive logs. So this tells exactly what is going on, and it's very good. Great. Actually, this is interesting for their attacker. So we are getting some clues. So this tells us it's probably vulnerable we are starting to suspect that. Why? Because it means this kind of payload, if actually, I'm going to copy this, if actually the SQL in the server or in the database that is used to validate this is like this, that means, let me go back right here, we are targeting the username. That means in the username, this was inserted, this payload was inserted here. So as the database was trying to, execute this, it got problems and it broke. Something on the server broke. So I hope this makes a lot of sense. Things are making a lot of sense. Then let's go back right over here. So we're gonna have to try another payload. So this gives us the morale to test them more, to continue testing, because our payloads are crashing stuff on the back end, on the server side. Let's try this. I wish we could crash it the more. Let's go back right here. Yeah, I'm gonna try to send this. Okay, guys, I hope you can see this is really dangerous and interesting at the same time. So still we got a 500 internal server error. That means this payload as well has crashed something on the server. The server is crashing, is failing to interpret this. It's struggling in the process of trying to execute this. It's struggling. So that gives us hope that this application is probably vulnerable. And what gives us much hope is these error messages, the verbose error messages. They're telling us exactly what went wrong. So what is the problem? Database error occurred. And what is the exact problem? What broke? It's just unterminated, or comments are at near. So they are explaining what exactly happened. So if you are familiar with structured query language, you're gonna understand what exactly is broke, and you're gonna have to customize your payload and come up with a working payload. Oh, this is making a lot of sense, guys. Okay, so and the hint here is check your SQL injection syntax. So what I need to make clear is in real world systems, you can barely find this. Like you can hardly really find this, whereby they even give a hint. But this is a safe learning environment. We try to make it very easy for the students, for the learners. So that's why there is a hint. But in real systems, it's very rare. I don't say it's completely impossible, because some people do make such mistakes, but it's very rare, just a few of them. So let's proceed with another payload and see. So this is bring 401 and authorized. So this gives us the morale to proceed, to continue testing, because of the different error messages. They give us a lot of hope. If the error message was constant 401, at least we would know there is maybe no string concatenation or interpolation. But the fact that we keep getting different error messages, including 500, which means something is broke on the server, that gives us the morale to test more. So let's take it to the next level. Assume you need to test a long list of payloads. Copying and pasting is not going to make a lot of sense. It's not going to make sense if you have maybe a very long list of payloads you need to test. That's not going to make sense. So we are going to automate this by using a feature in Burp Suite. So in Burp Suite, there's a feature called the intruder. This is it right over here. So the intruder is a very great feature. It helps us to automate, some tasks. So if you are on the Burp Suite community version, it's very limited. But if you have a pro version, so you can see the power of it. At this point, it's very limited, but we can use it. So this is how it really works. You can see right now we are in the intruder. We have to automate these payloads, this attack. So first, we're gonna select what we need to attack. We need to attack the username field. We need to inject payloads in the username fields. Then we are going to highlight all these up to here. And then we're going to right click and say add payload. So we're going to add the payloads one by one. But if you are on the paid version, on the pro version of Burp Suite, it's very easy to just, like add from the list, like upload a list of payloads, but we do not have access to that feature right now. So what we're gonna go do is come back right over here. So we have tested all those payloads. We don't have to waste time on them. We're gonna have to copy this payload and paste it right there, enter, then copy another one real quick, then go back here, paste it right there, hit enter, then copy another one, then put it right there, enter. We're gonna have to copy this as well and put it right there. So those are the payloads. We do not have to use these ones because we already tested with them and we saw their response. Then we need to test this. Okay, so that's done. So we are going to, so for the other stuff, you do not have to worry about them. For the payload type, you don't have to worry. We're gonna have to use a simple list and the count, all that. Don't worry about that. You're gonna have to say start the attack. So we're going to start the attack right now. Start. Okay, we are getting a notification right over here, like the burp intruder functionality is disabled in the community version, and if you wanna like have the full version of it, the full power of it, you need to use the full version of Burp Suite. So it has already finished to test. That's how very fast it is. And sadly, all the payloads have not been successful. We got 500. That means they cause problems on the server, like they crushed the server. So we have tested. That means this system is not vulnerable. Should we say that? Shall we get angry because we've not been successful? Yes, but no, we don't have to be angry at the moment, because remember one thing. Let's go back. We're gonna have to go back. I'm going to discard this. We shall go back if we want. So remember, we have been testing the username field, and at this point we can say these payloads didn't work in the username field. So let's test the password field. That's why we do not have to worry. Then let's test this. We're gonna have to highlight this and right click, then go to add payload. Okay, we already have the payload, guys. Okay, so we're gonna have to say start their attack. Okay, okay, so we can see it's done. You can check from here. You can see it's finished. Let's see if we got any different error message like status code. So we can see the status code or showing 401 unauthorized and 500. But remember, there are payloads we didn't add. So we can discard this and come here and add some payloads. Maybe they're gonna work. We're gonna add this. Copy another one. And another one. And another one. And this one. I think they are over right now. Okay, all right, I think they are over. Maybe we can even copy this, it doesn't matter, you can just copy. Let's make sure we have used every single payload. Okay, so right now we're gonna have to start the attack. Okay, so what we need to listen to look at is the status code, change in status codes. It's what we need to look at right now. At this point, we are getting two status codes. That's a 401 and authorized, and 500 internet server error. So it's not yet complete. It's actually about to finish up. It's about 18 out of 20 payloads. So it's done right now. You can see finished right over here. So we need to check, do we have any different kind of status code? So you can see all the status codes are actually bringing 500. So it means we shall not stop testing, because the 500 means something is broken on the server, and that gives us the morale to proceed testing. Okay, so this is what we're going to do then. It is giving 500 everywhere. We would be happy if we saw something like 200, which means okay, everything has been great. So we have to discard this. Okay, so I am going to clear this payload position. Clear. So at this time we were testing against all the two fields. Okay, so we're going to focus on only one. Let me clear this up, and here we're going to put anything like username. We can put anything like admin, and then target only one field, and that's the password field. Okay, so previously we were testing both of them at the same time and we were not successful. So at this point we're going to focus on on one of them, and that is the password. Why? Because we already tested the username and it failed. We tried both, they failed. Then we're going to the password field alone. Add payload. Okay, we already have our payload, so there's nothing to add. Then we need to start the attack right now. Okay, so you can see we are getting the same status codes. So it has already finished. You can see finished. Then we can look for a different status code if actually there is any. So you can see here all the status codes show 401 and 500. Something is breaking on the server. Okay, that's okay. I'm going to have to discard this. Then we can change something, and that is admin. We can leave it empty and then try again. Start. These are our payloads we have. So this time we're getting a very different status code. Okay, we are getting 400. So if you do not know what a particular status code means, don't worry about that. You just have to come to the internet and say 400 status code meaning. What does it mean? If you don't know what they mean. So this means a bad request. That request is not allowed, or maybe it's malformed. It's okay, like the server is having a hard time to interpret it. Okay, that's very okay for us. There is no any other difference. Okay, then we can discard this again. And so what is it that we are going to do? Then we are going to send this to, we're going to go back to the proxy. Then we're going to send this to the repeater. Then we're going to go to the repeater and try to test this manually without automating this. And we're going to test the password field manually because we already tested the username. Okay, we can look for payloads. We can try this first. Come back right over here. Copy this and replace with it. Then send this and see. Invalid username or password. That's wrong. Okay, we can try another one. Error. So this has also crashed the server. The database had a hard time to interpret that. That gives us the morale to proceed testing. Still the same problem. Okay, so the system is not, like, it's very hard right now. Let's continue testing. And boom, that's what. So we have actually been able to exploit this because I can see a different state as code that we had not yet got, and that's a 200, a 200 okay. And when I check down here, I can see success is true and message is login successful, a redirect to this admin. Actually, we have admin privileges. So that's why I told you we have gotten full access to the system. We have gotten admin privileges, guys. So we need to test this. If it really works, it's going to work on the front end because here burp says this is success. This payload is working right over here. We have been able to bypass it. Okay, let's test this. If it works out, then that's going to be good. Then we're going to go to the proxy and turn off the interceptor so we can be able to authenticate from the browser, right? I'm going to turn this off and go to this, and I'm going to use admin, and I'm going to use this payload. Let me first show you the payload. This right over here that worked in the burp suite. So let's write here admin and put this payload right here and try to authenticate. Oh guys, we have gotten access actually, and you can see we have been redirected to the dashboard without ever knowing even the right username, not even the password. We have gotten full access to the system, and you can see this is the dashboard and the system status, active threads. We can see the network modes. You can see a lot of stuff. The resource monitor, live activity, network topology. We can see the command like terminal. We can see the quick actions. There's a lot of stuff, guys, and this is very interesting. So that's how we exploit SQL injection vulnerabilities step by step without skipping anything. So they are really dangerous. You can see we have been able to gain full access to the system without even ever dreaming about the password or even the username. That's how dangerous it is. And we saw what are some of the causes: lack of input validation, input sanitization, direct stream interpolation, and a lot more. But those are some of the basic causes, okay? So if you want to learn these, if you don't you want to become dangerous at all these SQL injections and even any other very many more kinds like cross-site request forgery, parallel pollution, just sign up for a lab access code. You're gonna get a lab access code. You're gonna have full-time assistance from instructors. They're gonna help you out, okay? So that's very great, guys. Thank you for watching this, and I don't have a lot of words to say. I hope you've seen how dangerous SQL injection is. So you always need to test applications against it. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to test. We're not going to exploit. Today we exploited. We skipped the reconnaissance part, the testing part. Next time, we're going to have to first test. How do we identify SQL injection vulnerabilities? So thank you for watching, guys. Do not forget to sign up for our courses, yeah? I won't forget to tell you that Like if you want to really become dangerous, you need to join AstralGuard Cyber Academy, because we have what we call hands-on learning. We learn by doing. We have a lot of labs, right from the beginner, intermediate, and up to advanced labs. And you can see the courses are really interesting, and they're actually not expensive. Everybody can afford this. Okay. So thank you for watching. Do not forget to share the video if you find it important. And if you have any questions, you can write them in the comment section. I'm going to find them. Yeah, thank you for